Good morning, everybody. Welcome to SafeDefend Live. I am Dave Evans with Dr. Greg Vecchi, expert extraordinaire on everything that bad people do and can do to you. The question that I have for our audience today is, are you prepared? I asked Doc that question. He goes, prepared for what? Prepared for the next most likely thing that will attack your organization. So, Doc, what are we talking about?
Well, I think that it's a matter of really understanding what your threat is, right? And I think there's so many myths out there about what exactly the threat is. And I'll give you an example. I've gone, with Safe Defend, we go to, conferences and, vendor shows and things like this. And I always, make a point, especially on the bigger ones. We go in there, we set up our table and, to showcase what we do and everything, and just like what a vendor does. And I always walk around, right? So I'll walk down the things and I'm looking for all kinds of stuff. I'm looking, what do they got out there? Of course, my interest is the prevention piece. And that's usually the things they have the least of there. The focus is mostly response. Okay. And that's understandable to a certain point, obviously, because that's really the first thing you got to deal with, because you can't stop these attacks always, right? And as I'm looking through the response stuff and I'm looking through what's out there, I find a lot of cameras out, pointing outside. I find fencing. I find these high-end metal detectors and scanners and things to look for, weapons of people coming in. There's a real big emphasis on visitor logs, right? And finding out, is this potential person coming in? Are they going to be a threat to the kids? Are they a sexual predator, right? And linking into databases and things like this, right? And so essentially what it is almost all of them. It's funny because I've been to dozens of these, and I would probably say that 85 to 90%, maybe more, have to do with uh, dealing with the outside bad guy coming in, right? And so that seems to be the case, whether it's a school safety conference or it's a workplace type safety conference. It's a mixture. It's something that churches sometimes have vendors come in and things like this. Everybody's worried about the outside attacker, this, I guess, the crazed lunatic that's going to come in and shoot up their kids and things like that. And the thing is that one of the problems is that safety and security, it costs money, right? So a school's got to make a decision on what is going to be the best bang for their buck. Where are they going to put their limited budget in, right? And they're looking for a balance of something that's going to be effective and efficient, and it's going to deal with what the biggest problems are, what they should be, right? Because we can't be 100% on this, right? And so, and I think, and that to me is sad, because first off, it's not dealing with the real probability of the threats if you really look at it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And also, it's really just not a good, you're not a good steward of your money. You're not a good steward of your budgets, right? You want to put your budgets, where your most likely threats are, your most probabilities. That's what I want to start off with. Have you seen the same thing in your experience?
Well, I think it's interesting we're having this discussion because my understanding is a little more than 5% of these incidents are caused by a violent outsider that's angry and goes after people.
Mm-hmm.
Between 90 and 95% are people like, and trust,
Yep.
or that are part of the organization already. When you're a kid, your parents tell you an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and it seems like we're focusing on the cure, not the prevention, to go back to the old adage. So, when we start talking about this, we have to understand where the real threat is first, and then we have to address that area first. I'm going to use flying airplanes and airplane crashes as an example.
Right.
Back in the day, the airplanes were the problem, right? When we first started flying airplanes, it wasn't necessarily the pilot, it was the airplanes. But over time, through all the safety things you put in place and risk management tools that the Air Force put in place at the time, we went from 50% of them being aircraft, a maintenance problem with the aircraft, to 5%, right? Now, 95% of all fatality crashes in an airplane are pilot error. 95% are human error, right? So So now we address, how do we make the human better? What do we do about sleep schedules? How do we give them the best chances? What kind of training do they have? How are we keeping up with that training? What are we doing to make sure they're prepared in the event something happens to the airplane so they can fly the airplane out of it? This sounds a lot like what we should be doing in schools. If the problem is mental health with children, if the problem is employee health, mental health, if the problem is insiders that get frustrated over a situation, what seems like to me we should be paying attention, put our eye on that ball more, and spend more money and time with training and assessing and knowing the people on our team. Am I missing something?
No, you're right on target. The difference is, here is that we're dealing with a human problem instead of like a mechanical or
Yep.
environmental weather problem, or the actual operator problem. And so, exactly the same thing. It's just that it's just a different context. And one of the things to keep in mind is that, what it looks like in all these situations I've looked at with these vendors and stuff is it's like it's a solution looking for a problem, right? Okay. And it's a misunderstanding of the problem. And if you have a misunderstanding of the problem, then you're gonna waste your money and you're not gonna fix the real problem. And you hit it. You hit it right on target. We have about 90% of the problem, or the solution, looking for really what amounts to about 5% of the problem, right? Which is outsiders. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that an outsider isn't a potential problem, but again, you got to put your money where your probabilities are. And an easy way to do this, right, from a superintendent, uh, a corporate perspective, school perspective, church perspective, anything like this, is to really look at what are your probabilities of attack. Who might attack you, and where and what might they use, and what is going to be the threat, where is it coming from, what's the avenue, and things like this. And one of the basic things is, and this has been around forever, is first starting off with an understanding of workplace violence, right? Workplace violence and the types of workplace violence. And when I say workplace violence, I'm not talking about just corporations. I mean, workplace is also the school, right? Your workplace is also at your church or wherever it is that you're making your job. So when I say workplace, I'm saying all these areas, both school and corporate. And so your workplace violence is going to basically come from four types, right? Or four reasons, or four motivations, right? But as far as who that person is, it's not going to be one of four people. It's either going to be someone who's essentially a stranger. Okay. They are not a student. They are not an employee. They are not a customer. They have no connection or relationship with the school or the workplace, right? So that's type one. Okay. The next one you got to look at is type two. So if you have a situation like a Amazon or a Macy's or a grocery store, or let's say an attorney client, right, or a customer, right? It's customer relationships. When they get violence, that's type two. Type three is really what we're talking about, and you just pointed it out. About 91 to 95%, is going to be someone from within, right? As you pointed out, it's going to be that current or former student. It's going to be that current or former employee. It's going to be someone and essentially trust. And if they're there, you're not going to try to keep them out, right? Because they're supposed to be there. So putting up fences and metal detectors and things like this to keep the bad guys out, well, these guys aren't bad guys, right? Or bad people. And so there's your third, right? And that's the key one, at least for our discussions here with the targeted violence, right? And then the other one is kind of a spillover, where you have someone associated with the employee or the student who brings violence because they're upset or angry, or they want to bring violence to that person. Maybe the angry dad coming in, or the abusive spouse coming in and causing violence. So those are your four things, right? And so those are the types of violence. So then you have to just look at, okay, so what is likely going to happen for me as far as the types? Well, then we get into the motivations, right? Why would someone attack or cause a problem at a workplace or school? Well, you got to essentially just a few things, right? You got someone who is doing it for personal gain, right? it could be like I call that a resource predator, right? That's kind of the fancy term. But someone who's coming in, a bank robber is one. Someone who breaks in at night to steal things or whatever, or to rob people. That's a different type of thing, right? And that's going to be a lot of times your stranger in a bank robbery. It could be any of these other ones, but you have to look at the motivation and your probabilities, right? Then number two is it might be the one that we're going to run into, which is someone who's got a beef, right? Someone's got a grievance with the organization or someone in the organization. Okay. And when you have that, which is almost always what we have here, that's what you plan for and what you buy for and what you prepare for is that. So if you are in a bank, you may have a different preparation and different security than you do in a school or workplace because the probability of threat is different. And it's about probabilities. It's about, okay, what's most likely to happen? What's the risk? Not that you're going to never have a stranger come into a school, right? That could happen, right? And so that's what kind of what I want to get across is that, when you are listening to vendors, you're a superintendent, you are a corporate, you're listening to vendors. People are trying to sell you everything. They're trying to tell you a solution to a problem, right? That doesn't really exist. Sit back and really pay attention. What are my critical assets that I have to protect? The people, the property, my area of concern, right? What's your critical assets, right? And then what are your critical areas? And what are your critical times when these things might happen, right? And then what are the critical avenues? How would someone come to that building A, the high school or the middle school, right? And then you look at who might that person be? What might be the motivation and what type of violence? Once you have all that, and you look at that really carefully and really prioritize that, then it's easy or easier, right, to figure out, okay, if I've only got $100,000 to spend, okay, based on that analysis, I'm going to be a good steward of my money, a good steward of security. Certainly not 100%, but at least doing it based on an analysis of probabilities, not just stuff that you see on TV or assumptions that we make, which is usually off of the media and these consistent myths that are out there that people glom on and try to scare people to try to sell their stuff. So, and the same with SafeDefend, right? You can spend a lot less money for SafeDefend, right? And it might work or it might not work. So then you got to look at the technology. And for example, the hardwired approach that we have is second to none. It's going to beat any type of clicker or wireless thing when you take in consideration the state of someone who is fighting for their life or is scared for their life or their kids. And so that's just some things to keep in mind. And I always like to remind that because we get so sucked into all the stories and the technology and the coolness, and you got to have this and the high pressure salesman. And that's what you don't want to do with security stuff.
Absolutely. I think keeping it simple is always the best policy. And for the superintendents out there, I need you to really think. You're smart people. So you need to think through the process and walk step by step of every action that's going to happen and be realistic when you think about how a teacher or a staff member can and will respond. Because when gunfire is going off in your building, things change. Psychology kicks in. Physical things kick in. Your body's going to do certain things you didn't expect to happen. Fine motor skills go away. So you have to keep things simple. And if it's one of your students, it's even worse because you know the child, the person in there doing the damage, and you grew up with them and you raised them for all intents and purposes. So there's a lot to think about in that process. Start thinking about what your real problem is and start looking for solutions that solve the root cause of targeted violence in our schools. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Nice job.
All right, Doc, as you can see, I'm at my alternate work location this weekend.
I can hear the birds. I'm jealous. Sounds very good.
We got foxes and deer and birds and cranes. It's busy.
That's awesome. I love it.
So I'm going to go work somewhere at the house, and then if I can get my boat trailer fixed, I'll be on the lake later tonight.
No, that sounds awesome, man. We have a great week
later, Doc. You too, brother.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.